Or maybe we could run mug shop. They used to be in.
Just where you place your notes.
Yes, sir.
Does it matter if it was an ink or pencil?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Did it matter if it was an ink or pencil?
No, it doesn't.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At this particular time, we'd like to welcome you to the regularly scheduled public hearing of the Shreveport-Caddo Parish Metropolitan Planning Commission. At this particular time, we do have a brief opening. We'll have an invocation by Mr. Robertson and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Newbert. And if you care to join with us, would you please stand?
Dear Lord, we ask your guidance today as we meet. We ask for wisdom. We ask for humility. We ask for charity toward our fellow brothers and sisters. We appreciate this great earth that you gave us, and we are always striving to keep it in the way that you want us to keep it. So please grant our requests and watch over us as we meet today and keep all of us safe and healthy. Amen.
Amen.
If you'll place your hand over your heart, face the flag, recite with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Thank you, Ms. Newbert. At this particular time, I'll share with the audience some of the rules that we'll be expecting each one of us to follow as we proceed through the proceedings today. For public hearing agenda items, if you wish to make public comments on an application, we have MPC comment slips at the speaker's stand next to the podium. For future notification purposes, it is very important that you fill out a slip, drop it in the box when you come forward to speak. Please state your full name, your mailing address, and zip code before addressing the board. We will call each case on the agenda in order and hear first from the applicant, then those speaking in favor of the application. 10 minutes are allocated for the principal spokesperson and 3 minutes for each additional speaker. We will then hear from those wishing to speak against an application. Again, 10 minutes are allocated for the principal spokesperson and 3 minutes for each additional speaker. One representative of the application can then speak in rebuttal if desired. After hearing comments on each case, the board will then immediately deliberate and vote on that case before moving on to the next case on our agenda. Please note that when the board is deliberating, members of the public are not permitted to make any comments. Any member of the public may request a copy of the board's decisions on a particular case by contacting our office at 318-673-6480 after 1 p.m. on tomorrow, or by accessing our website at shreveportcaddompc.com. For consent agenda items and other agenda items not requiring a public hearing, public comments can be made upon request by filling out an MPC comment slip. If comments are requested for a specific agenda item, the chair will offer an opportunity for those comments prior to the commission taking action on the agenda item. All of the MPC board zoning recommendations are submitted to either the city council or the parish commission for final decision, depending on the location of the property that's being discussed. Please note that it is your responsibility to contact the appropriate governing bodies about their procedure as related to the matter that you're concerned with. Copies of this document and phone numbers to contact the governing bodies are available on the table next to the podium and in the foyer or entryway to this room. Now, as a courtesy, please remember to turn off all cell phones while the MPC board is in session. The commission values your testimony and appreciates your compliance with the guidelines. If there is someone here who anticipates to talk about any particular subject that's not on the agenda, but who would like to make public comments, then please collect a slip, fill it out, and see that this gentleman up front here gets that slip in hand in order for us to make sure when we get to public comments on the agenda, on the item 17, then we'll be able to afford you that opportunity. Having said that, we will call for a motion to approve minutes from the last meeting. So
Second.
motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Newbert. All those in favor, please vote yes. Opposition votes no. That motion's carried. All right, we do have one item on the consent agenda listing, case number 21-3-CAC, closing and abandonment. Is there anyone present who care to speak in favor or against this particular item? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Newbert, second by Mr. Morton. All those in favor, please vote yes. Oppositions, no. All right, that motion carries. We'll now move into our public hearing items, starting with item number 7, case number 21-9-SC, final plat major, Wallace Lake Development LLC.
Hey, good afternoon. Michael Kelsch with Rayleigh & Associates, 4913 Shed Road, Bossier City, Louisiana, 71111. We're the engineers here on behalf of the developer. This is just the next unit of St. Andrews subdivision. It's a 19-lot unit. It will pretty much follow the master plan from the original master plan from, I think, 2010. Here to answer any questions.
All right, is there any questions for Mr. Kelps? Did I say that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Hearing none, sir, thank you very much. Is there anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Is there anyone present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Any opposition to this request? Hearing none, board members, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Joseph,
Second.
second by Mr. Robertson.
Mr.
Please.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
One question. The staff report says this is a 26,000 acre tract of land. Is that a typo?
You do say. I would think that would be a typo.
What is the appropriate number? 26 acres?
Yes, sir. It's on the plat, 25.724 acres.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that.
The staff report does say it's a 26,299 acre tract.
All right.
We accept that.
And we'll move forward then, if that's okay. We had a motion by Mr. Joseph and a second by whom?
Say it, Mr. Sater.
Mr. Sater. All those in favor, please vote yes. Oppositions, no. Thank you very much. That motion carries.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, sir. All right, we have case number 21-30-P, zoning request, Southwestern Electric Power Company.
Board Member Joseph must have been up here.
Good to see you, Ms. Corbin.
Michael Corbin, Swebco, 428 Travis Street, Shreveport, Louisiana, 71101. Good afternoon, board members, Mr. Clark, staff. Here to support case 21-30-P. Was out of town and could not be here last month. I know that it was deferred over to this month's meeting. And we have worked with Mr. Clark, and we understand the need to provide a greater buffer next to the residential property. So we are in agreement with the 200-foot buffer where the properties are adjacent on the backside of this development, and ask that you would support the zoning change.
Any questions for Mr. Corbin?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
I think, and this may be for the staff as well, but when we went through this yesterday in our work session, are we talking about this 50-foot section, or I'm hearing a different number at the podium?
If I may, Mr. Corbin, after the pre-briefing on yesterday, we came to an agreement to provide the entire 200-foot buffer.
Can you speak up, Mr. Clark?
The discussion from yesterday is relevant to what's being presented today. You can just wipe that out of your mind. SWEPCO has agreed to the initial proposal that we made to them for a 200-foot buffer across the entire back property line.
Okay. Okay. That's easy.
Any other questions? Anyone else? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Is there anyone present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Any opposition to this request? All right, hearing none, board members, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Newbert, second by Mr. Morton. All those in favor, please vote yes. Oppositions, no. All right, that motion's approved. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As we move forward to case number 21-150-C, special use permit and site plan, Vintage Design Group.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Hobbs. I'm the applicant representing Vintage Design Group. We did the site plan submission.
Address.
Would you be kind enough to give us your address, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 417 Lake Street. And I'm just here to answer any questions the board may have.
All right, board members.
Did this require an NPP?
Is that a question?
That's a
for
question,
staff?
yes. Well, it's a question in general. Is it,
Mr.
I
Dean?
see no indication that an MPP was conducted, so evidently was not required, Mrs. Newbert.
did not? Okay.
All right, any other comments, questions?
You're aware of the staff recommendation relative to the stipulations?
Yes, sir.
You have no problem?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right,
And you're speaking on the restriping?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Joseph.
all right, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone present who care to speak in favor of this request? Is there anyone present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Any opposition to this request? All right, hearing none, we'll call for a motion.
Motion to approve with steps?
Second.
Motion to approve with steps, Mr. Joseph, second by
Newbert.
Ms. Newbert. All those in favor, please vote yes. Oppositions, no. All right, that motion carries. Thank you very much. The next case is item number 10, case number 21-158-Z. C as in Charles. Zoning request, Mr. Robert Johnson.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Johnson, 2619 LaGuardia.
Mr. Johnson, tell us a little bit about what you're wanting us to do for you today.
We was trying to get it rezoned so I could be able to keep my horses where I have them at.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Johnson?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Newbert.
Hi, Mr. Johnson.
Hello.
Thank you for coming today. How long have you lived at this property?
I've been there for 21 years.
Okay. Have you had the horses the whole time that you've been at this property?
Yes, ma'am. They've been there since I was a kid, really.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
We had horses on the property when I was a kid. My grandparents had horses also.
This is family property, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How many horses do you have there?
4.
Okay. You're aware there will be a request for a reduction in the number of those horses if this is recommended for approval today?
Yes, my daughter bought a place in Grand Canyon. We're going to move some of them there. And like I say, we just wanted to have the horses at my place too. So, but most of them going to be going to my daughter's house in Grand Canyon.
Okay, so I think the number we discussed yesterday was that he would be allowed two.
I think it's 2 horses.
It's a little over an acre of property, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Any more questions for Mr. Johnson? All right, sir, thank you very much. Is there anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who care to speak in favor? Is there anyone present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Please step forward. The first person will have 10 minutes as a spokesperson. After that, 3 minutes are allocated to anyone else.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Linda Sylvie. I live at 2121 Ruby Street. I own property at 2109 Ruby Street, and I own 2 vacant lots. And I'm in opposition of the horses because we can't get suitable zoning. We had zoning for double wide homes once before. They changed without any notification to us. Now we can't get double wide, but they putting horses everywhere they tear a house down. They putting horses. And I don't think it's fair that you can put a horse where people want to put homes. And the horses haven't been there for 21 years. Now, more people did have horses there every so often, and it was like 1 or 2 horses, but now we wake up every morning having to run horses out of our yards and everything. And I don't think it's fair, and the neighborhood really don't want the horses there. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Sibley? Ms. Sibley? Before you leave, any questions for this lady?
Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Hi.
Can you point to me on his machine there where you live in relation to?
I'm on Ruby Street right there at the very corner where it's a Hawking where he want to put it. If you go all the way down to the end.
Can you point on the machine for me with your finger? Show me.
Okay.
Will you help me?
My property is all this in here, and then I have property back down this street also. But I wanted to put a double wide home there, but I can't put a home there because it's been rezoned for a singular manufactured home, and I can't afford that. But every morning I'm having to get up and run horses out of my yard and stuff. And my neighbors complain about the divots and stuff in their yards, and we're just not satisfied with it.
Is there anyone else in your neighborhood that has horses besides this person?
No. There are horses down Nesca Drive, which is this road here. But they get out sometime too. But horses are always in my yard just about every morning. I don't know who they belong to.
And you do not know who they belong to?
No.
You'll get Mr. Chair. He's got his hand up here.
You'll get a chance to come back.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Is there anyone else who care to speak in opposition to this?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
before Ms. Sylvie leaves, I would like to share with her that we did listen to the concerns of citizens in neighborhoods in the city of Shreveport, and she's absolutely right. The ability to request approval for manufactured housing was repealed, but it has been reinstated, and every lot up on the MLK area is eligible to apply for manufactured housing.
Thank you.
That's good, Mr. Clark. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
My name is Lillian Washington. I live at 2108 Ruby Street. I'm against having the area rezoned. And the reason is, 40 years ago, I lived in that same house, that same place. It was clean. Right now, it's not clean. It needs to be cleaned up. Also, I want to know what economical impact would it bring for our area. So I'm waiting to see what's gonna happen, but right now I'm against it. So like I say, I lived at that same address 44 years ago, and it was clean. No horses, no nothing. Just a residential single home. So thank you.
Ma'am, can you show us on the map where you live now?
I live right behind Hawkins, in that big old space right there. It's only 4 houses on the street that I live on right now. But that's the area that, and I grew up in that area. I've been there 69 years. I grew up in that area. So no ma'am, we don't want it rezoned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Washington. Is there anyone else present who care to speak in opposition? Is there anyone else present who care to speak in opposition? All right, hearing none, this is an opportunity for Mr. Johnson to do a rebuttal if you care to come back and make any comments, sir.
Yes, sir. I agree with about horses being out, but like I say, as long as I had horses and my grandparents had horses, our horses never been out. It's, I guess you would call it cattle that the man have horses at, and his horses out just every day at the school. And most of the time when I'm the person that go running from the school and they see my face and they automatically think they're my horses. But like I say, my horses had never been out, and we really stopped riding on the Cooper Road. We go to trail rides because it done got so dangerous on the Cooper Road. Me and my daughter don't know to ride. And but like I say, I agree with the ladies. Horses out. We run horses back there, back in the woods, really. And like I say, I try to help the man keep his horses up, but you know that's a full-time job.
I know this probably isn't a question that you need to have to answer, but what would you recommend to be done in a case like that where you're talking about these folk who have horses that just roam the neighborhood?
Like I say, I would think he at the age that he's not even ride anymore. I was thinking he would sell them or get rid of them. Like I say, I tried to help him a few times going back there to check on him, kept him fed up for him. But, you know, that was wear and tear on me because I work every day myself. And, you know, I couldn't do it anymore. And like I said, I did it for about 2 years for him, just try to help him keep his horses up, fix a place to keep him in. But, you know, they get out anytime they get ready. And like the new neighborhood we got up there, you know, they was getting in there. The lady come to my house, and I let her understood that they wasn't my horses, but I would come get them out the place. And like I said, when they go over to the school, I see them because I stay right across from the school. And I see them over there, I go over there on my four-wheeler and get them, you know, to try to keep peace with everybody.
So when you go get them, then they belong to you all of a sudden?
Yes, that's why I'm here today, because when they come back my way, they come back down LaGuardia, they automatically think they're my horses because I'm right on the corner.
And you're the one rounding them up?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Robinson before Mr. Johnston, I'm sorry. All right, thank you very much, sir. All right, board members, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Newman. All those in favor, please vote yes. Oppositions, no. All right, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Ms. Newman, I got my cue board now.
Oh,
Yes.
I forget.
So
Okay,
make sure I
thank you.
don't overlook Mr. Clark, okay?
Yeah, because I'm
Mr.
walking
Clark,
down.
make sure I don't overlook Mr. Clark.
Oh, I will.
All right, all right. Item number 11, case number 20-164-C, zoning request, William L. Gary, APAC. KSLA.
Hello, I'm Bill Gary. I'm an architect with William L. Gary, APC, an architectural firm in Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm here representing KSLA Channel 12 and the potential rezoning of their property on 1812 Fairfield Avenue. I believe you have all reviewed all the details, and I'm basically here to answer any questions that you might have about the rezoning.
All right, board members? Any questions for this gentleman?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Robertson.
Thank you.
Mr.
Just a
Gary?
second. Mr. Gary.
Mr. Gary?
I'm sorry. I thought you have a question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for
Yes,
coming
sir. I'm
today.
sorry.
Is there going to be a change in the appearance of the TV station?
No, sir. They will, the reason for this zoning request from CUC to IC would be allow to put an antenna in the back parking on the west side of KSLA on their existing property that is much like the other antennas that are there, except that this one is 100 feet. And so they have an antenna that communicates with the Mooring Sport broadcast antenna that takes channel 12 all over, but basically this is a relay antenna. It'll basically, I mean, in the words that I had originally on a narrative, it will allow modernization and improve the communications with the KSLA broadcast tower and the broadcast tower that's up in the North Shreveport area right now and near Mooring Sport.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Garrett? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who care to speak in favor? Is there anyone present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Any opposition to this request?
Mr. Andrews,
Ms. Newbert?
if I may, it's not about this, but I just wanted to point out to you that the queue is not working.
All
So if
right.
we're pushing the button, it's not queuing up.
Well, I'll tell you what, we know how to make it work.
Yes, sir.
Just get
Yes,
my
we do.
attention.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, what do I hear? What's your pleasure, board members?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Joseph,
Second.
second by Mr. Robertson. All those in favor, please vote yes. Opposition, vote no. All right, thank you very much. That motion carries. Case number 21-166-C, zoning request, Mr. Alfonso Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alfonso Williams with 2410 Winbrook Court. I'm the owner of AWE Construction and A&M Smart Investments.
Good to see you, Mr. Williams.
And nice to see you too, Mr. Joseph. We currently purchased the property on, I think that's Fiera, is how you pronounce that. And we are anticipating putting some multi-family townhouses there.
All right, sir. Any questions for Mr. Williams?
Have you had the opportunity, I'm sorry.
Mr. Joseph?
Have you had the opportunity to discuss this with folks in the neighborhood?
We actually gave the opportunity, and nobody had any opposition to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Hilbert?
I guess this is for Mr. Clark. Was it MPP required for this?
We required one
Okay.
to be conducted.
And-
It was done on October 18th.
And this was the one, there was no
There was no attendance.
no attendance? Okay, thank you.
All right. Board members, any additional questions? All right, hearing none, Mr. Williams, thank you very much, sir. Is there anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Is there anyone present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Any opposition to this request? All right, hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
I have a question.
Question?
Did we have any written opposition to this?
We have no written opposition.
Okay, thank you.
To my knowledge.
All right.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Newbert.
Second.
Second by Mr. Joseph. All those in favor, vote yes. Opposition, vote no. All right, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Item number 13, case number 21-167-C, zoning request, Key Legacy Investment Group, LLC. Yes. I'll be glad. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Good afternoon. Name's DeAndreas Clark. Address 8304 Creekdale Street, 71107. My wife and I are the co-owners of Key Legacy Investment. We're here today to submit our request for the rezoning of 106 Boulevard from a R15 zoning to a R2 duplex or two-family dwelling. My wife and I purchased 106 Boulevard earlier this year while fully rehabbing another property on the 100 block of Merrick Street, also located in the Highland area. As soon as we bought the property, we secured it by placing new locks and doors on the property to deter any potential squatters until we began work on the property. Neighbors mentioned how prior to us purchasing the property, people would often rummage and squat in the house. So we secured it and locked it until we finished completing work on Merrick Street. Once we finished the property on Merrick Street and it was occupied with a tenant, we began focusing rehabbing Boulevard. I think it's important that I make clear that when we bought the property, it was and currently still is configured as a duplex, which I will later show in the slides. There was a fire at the end of 2019 to the second story unit, which then led to the previous owners listing the property for sale as a 2-unit property. This is confirmed in a signed affidavit, which my wife has here, that we obtained from the previous homeowners. The affidavit also stated that the property was marketed and listed in the MLS as a duplex by a licensed real estate agent. Around late August, we began to pull permits through the city and began work on the property. It was around this time that we were made aware by zoning that while the property is configured as a duplex and we bought the property with the intentions of completely revitalizing it as such, it was, however, zoned as a R15 single-family zoning. This prompted us to begin looking into the property's history to see what the major changes were done to the property, not only before we bought it, but the previous owners as well. It was during this time that we found out that the second meter that we believed to be there the entire time when we bought the property was in fact installed there 4 years prior without a permit. Once we found this out, we finished putting the roof on there, which I'll later show in the slides. We finished the work on the roof as well as reframing, redoing the attic, finished the framing of the master bedroom on the top unit. And after that, we stopped and ceased all major work on the property and began to apply for the rezoning of the property to an R2 two-family. We also provided pictures of the structure showing the fire damage pre-existing configuration, indicating separate independent entrances for the upper and lower units, and that each unit has a similar layout with its own living room, kitchen, bath, laundry, and bedrooms. This served as evidence that the structure was also converted to a duplex prior to us purchasing it. The property is predominantly in an R15 single-family residential zoning area, but is 1 block west of a large R2 multifamily zoning district and 2 blocks south of a large R3 multifamily district. Also within R15, there are several individual properties that are spot zoned as R2, which is what we were requesting this property to be, or R3, 3 of which are within 2 blocks of the subject property. The existing spot zoning in the area is a type that is compatible with the character and development of the neighborhood. So simply put, the spot zone areas in R115 are in R15, correction, are similar to what we're basically doing today. They went through the same process to be spot zone, and that's pretty much what we're attempting to do here today. We also would like to highlight that, as mentioned in the MPC staff report, a drive-by site visit was conducted on October 13th by staff members. Staff members noted in the report that this street is predominantly small, single-family, and a few large residential structures similar in size to our structure. They also noted that there were other large structures within the same block with more than one residence, as indicated, with multiple entrances and mailboxes on the structure. Within a 1-block radius around the property, there are multiple other visible duplexes and some residences with accessory structures that also appear to be dwellings as indicated. This thus validated that our intended use of the property as a duplex is consistent and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Also mentioned in the staff report, it was reported that with respect to the envisioned land use area, the future land use map of 2013 Great Expectations Master Plan shows this area as residential medium. To my understanding, residential median is designed to be a mix of single-family townhouses and small apartment buildings, thus further indicating our request to rezone to a two-family residential aligns with the vision of this master plan. If I could orient you to the slide, this right here is the property that we have submitted for rezoning. This right here is the spot zone property that I was mentioned earlier. Now, what this map doesn't show, and what I was saying was indicated in MPC's staff report, is properties like this one located here, this one located here, as well as these two on this same block, 100 block, are currently being, one of these are currently being occupied and rented as a duplex. So simply put, what we're trying to do, all we're trying to do today is do this legally. We're trying to, it's already pre-existing duplexes on that block that pretty much haven't done what we did today to try to be in good standing. So I think it's important that we highlight that. Per Unified Development Code requirements, we hosted a neighborhood participation meeting October 6th at 6 p.m. There were 11 people in attendance. We utilized that time to not only tell our plans of the property, but also hear and provide reasonable solutions and provide peace of mind to surrounding neighbors. Some of the primary concerns noted were parking. To accommodate the parking average of 2 vehicles per household, we let everyone know that in addition to restoring the 2-car garage, we would also provide additional parking with a 20-by-20 slab with assigned parking next to the garage, as indicated in the slide. Could we, yeah, it should be pictures of the property as it currently is constructed. Noise concern was another concern. It was said that due to close proximity to the neighbor located to the west of the property, in the past had to endure listening to conversations of past renters. We informed the neighbor that we would be willing to install a privacy fence in compliance with the code. Property value concern. We told neighbors that there were already other 2-family and multi-family dwellings in the neighborhood. There should not be any adverse effect to property values. Simply put, as mentioned before, our intended use for this property as a duplex is consistent and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And additionally, restoring a property that has long stood blight and vacant will improve property values as opposed to it remaining vacant and unused. Lawn maintenance. Lawn maintenance concern. I let everyone know that we include in all our leases with our tenants that we are in charge of maintaining the lawn care. Types of tenants concern. One thing that we agreed with the opposed and stressed that we are just as invested, if not more, is ensuring that we thoroughly screen potential tenants. We even elaborated on our intentions to rent to veterans through the HUD-VASH program and how eligible veterans must be able to complete activities of daily living and live independently in the community with assigned case management and supportive services. Due diligence prior to the property. As I mentioned before, the property was marketed to us as a duplex when we purchased it. At the same meeting, one opposed stated that had we just done our due diligence prior to buying the property, we wouldn't be asking the MPC to step in and fix our mistakes. I then proceeded to show the opposed neighbor the signed affidavit from the previous owner, which, as I mentioned before, stated the property was listed, marketed and listed on the MLS as a duplex by a licensed real estate agent, and further explained that once we found out the property was configured as a duplex but not zoned as one, that we were well within our rights to request a zoning change through MPC, and part of the reason this process is available for circumstances like this. Type of work, lastly, type of work done to the property. I mentioned during the meeting that to restore the property based off its current configuration is currently designed and configured as a duplex. It's approximately $80,000 worth of work to include but not limited to all new electrical wiring, new HVAC system, new roof, new plumbing, replacing all damaged, charred, and distressed lumber, reinforcing the firewall between the two living spaces, garage remodel, and additional parking, as well as finishes like paint, new flooring, and appliances, all of which will be inspected during and upon completion by the city. While I appreciate his input, the opposed response, no.
You were watching that clock, aren't you?
Yes, sir. I was trying to get all the information out.
You're one of the few people that's ever stood there and actually watched the clock.
I actually got quite a little bit more. I want to show you guys the pictures as well to show you the action.
Pictures in front of us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
On the computer, if you don't, all of the ones showing the repairs and what have you.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to reiterate to everyone the current configuration and the reason why we took the pictures as it currently was. I wanted to show everyone how it was before we bought the property, as well as the new roof that we put on. And like I said, we pretty much ceased all activity until we came to some sort of solution on how to move forward with the property.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's one of the few presentations we heard that's been quite detailed. Any questions for this gentleman? Yes, Mr. Robertson?
Clark, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Clark, thank you. I'm looking at what I think is a spreadsheet of nearby neighbors, and it appears that there are quite a few LLCs on this list, which
Yes.
tells me that this part of Highland is an area of business investment, which I would assume would be rental property.
Yes, sir.
Right?
That's correct.
Okay. It's really just a comment more than a question. I support people wanting to rebuild in Highland and make their investments in Highland and bring good people to that neighborhood. So best of luck.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Clark?
I do.
Ms. Newbert?
Do you have any information maybe from a realtor or someone that you work with on what you expect the value of this to be after completion?
After completion? Yes, ma'am. Roughly, well, we've been in talks with the appraiser. Like I said, we've ceased everything. So the last conversation that we had, it was based on the pretense that it would be a duplex. So with all the work that we put in and everything, he said roughly, given that area, roughly around 160 to 170,000 as a
After completion? After completion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Well, all right, Mr. Clark. Is there anyone else present who'd care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who'd care to speak in favor of this request?
You have two people holding their hand up back over here in the corner. I don't think you can see.
All right.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Lisa Hayes, and I'm a property standard inspector. Address is 1025 Shreveport Barksdale Highway, 7110501. I've been dealing with Mr. Clark for a minute. This property is in my area that I have to inspect. I used to get numerous complaints about the property. It stayed vacant for a long time. The city itself had to board it up. We had to clean it up. There was a care premise on it, and I currently have it in for demolition. It's on the docket to eventually go to environmental court that we've started. But since Mr. Clark has had the property, he has done a total revitalization of the property, which is really good. We have a lot of properties in Highland that are horrible and have to end up being torn down, and I would rather see a house that's been done over than a vacant lot there. He is correct. He had to come in and board. We had vagrants staying in there. We had homeless people staying in there. And it was actually a danger to the neighbors that was staying around the property. Once he bought the property, it has totally changed and he had started cleaning up. And I'm just in favor of him continuing what he's doing. I don't want to see him stop working on the property. The other property he purchased on Merrick Street was a burned house. It was in for demolition. He took that house and turned it all the way around. It's now being rented out, and it made the property on that street better. As a matter of fact, the house that's next door to it, made them start to want to do something with it. So I'm in favor of him keeping the house, keeping doing what he's doing, and hopefully he can get it zoned for whatever he needs to get it zoned for. Thank you.
All right, before you leave the podium, ma'am.
Oh, yes, sir.
Mr. Ellerson?
Thank you for your testimony. I have a question in general about, I'm interested in your experience in dealing with rental properties in this area versus single-family homes. What do you see just in terms of the upkeep and maintenance in rentals versus homes that are owned? Do you notice a big difference? You're here on behalf of someone that wants to convert it to multifamily, so I'm kind of interested in that what it's like in Highland right there.
Well, what I see basically is people out of town buying properties in our Highland neighborhood, and they don't live here and they don't care. So when they rent it out, they have no clue as to what they're renting to. With him, he's here and he's looking at it and he's investing in it. I get people who want to be tax sale buyers, and that's what I have a lot of in Highland. They're tax sale buyers and they don't care what they have, so the rental properties are horrible. Unless you're here and you're investing back into the community, into the city, you have no clue. I have cases now that I am trying to have demolished because they're tax sale buyers. So yes, the homeowners will take care of their property, and I have a lot of rental properties, and if the rental people are here or the company's here, then I tend to be able to reach out to them quickly to have them to go over there, clean it up, cut the grass, or do something. I'd rather reach out and touch somebody than have to keep sending them stuff.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions for Ms. Hayes? Yes, sir, Mr. Robertson.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said by that term you used twice. What type of buyer?
Tax sale buyers.
Tax sale.
Tax sale. They will see a property and they will put an investment in a tax sale buyer, and then they don't ever come. They just own it by buying the taxes on it, I guess, for a tax write-off. But they never come to our city, or they're out of state or somewhere else and just doing something, but they're not putting anything back into it.
Absentee.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
All right, any more questions for Ms. Hayes? Well, we're glad to have you here. This is a conversation that we hear.
Yes, sir,
more
Mr.
about.
Andrews.
We talked a little bit about that on yesterday, and I'm sure there's going to be some additional conversation coming up in the future.
Yes, sir.
Relative to this subject.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Please come forward. We'll entertain one person at a time. You don't have to leave, just stay close by. If it's a husband and wife team, I understand.
Yeah, we a duo in this thing here, sir.
If she just stand close to you, I got you. All right.
Yeah, that's my support group.
I understand. You do the talking and we'll work with you.
Yes, sir. My name is Ronnie Sibley, this is Ruthie Sibley, and we reside at 124 Boulevard Street. And what we're here to support Mr. Clark in his venture that he's doing with the property at that particular location. I don't know the exact address. Excuse me. And I want to commend him because I think it's a good thing that he's doing. I don't think it's a negative because for the simple fact we have the same vision to do the same thing with our properties, which is in the next block at 124 Boulevard, in the next block over. So what we're doing here today, we're learning from his experiences. So didn't know the questions to ask and didn't know what actions to take. So with this in process, we're learning, we're in a learning stage, okay? We're both retired and we have a property. We resided there since 2010, okay? we have questions, and we didn't know what we were gonna have to do in order to do what we wanted to do, because the properties that where we resided, we have the same, as I said, same vision. We had a question that we wanted to ask: would we have to go through the same problem or go through the same motions in order to widen our driveway?
Hold on just a second. Staff, can you help him, or perhaps maybe invite him to come spend some time, he and his wife, with someone?
I think the best thing to do on that kind of question is just get with staff, come and see us. We'll be glad to help you. It doesn't appear it would have to go through a rezoning process just to do a driveway change. If you were changing something about the occupancy or something of that issue, we would, but if it's just your driveway, just come to talk to staff. We'll look at the code and see what you'd have to do.
And staff would be Ms. Correa?
That would be a good person.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I'm all for this young man and his wife. They came knocking on our door.
You'll have to take a seat now if she's gonna talk.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just right there. Yes, sir. I am in full support of this couple 100% because, like I said, they are bringing a positive to the community. Besides, when he broke it all down to us, it was already a duplex. And I know we have them all over Highland, whether they've been zoned for a duplex or not, but they're there. And so I just want to let y'all know that we are in totally 100% of this couple because that property, I remember the night, day that it caught fire. And I know the condition the house was in, and we had said, I wonder what they're gonna do with that property, but now we got our answer. We had an investor to come along and brought up the value in the community. So yes, we support them.
All right, now, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who care to speak in favor of this request? Anyone else present who care to speak in favor? Is there anyone present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Any opposition, please come forward. State your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Coleman. My husband is Ricky Coleman. We are at 102 East Boulevard Street, Shreveport, 71104. As a member of the Highland Neighborhood Association and was the Highland Restoration Association, we were always excited to have new homeowners and renters move into our neighborhood. We welcome investors that want to restore homes in our community. We have lived at our home at 102 East Boulevard since 2003. We're opposed to the zone change request for the property at 106 East Boulevard from a single-family residential to a multifamily housing. This property was never a multifamily duplex or a separate rental property for almost 20 years that I've lived next door. There's never been a 106.5 East Boulevard, and the following owners can attest to that: Jimmy and Doris Randall, or Rosa, which have been there since '95 at 101 East Boulevard, or John Sumner and Rose Sumner at 102 College, and they've been in the neighborhood since 1975. I know the history of this property from the original owner, Miss Evelyn McNeil. Ms. McNeil passed away in 2007. The second floor of this home was used only to accommodate family and friends. The house was unoccupied until 2017. Then the property at 106 East Boulevard was purchased, and that owner attempted to remodel the single-family residential home, and at some point installed a illegal second electric meter. We believe renters can be good neighbors, but we've had several concerns from previous owners from the remodeling that he attempted to do. There was a lady and a man there. They kind of lived on both floors. They knew each other, had constant issues and police calls. Then they moved out. Then the other renters came in. There was several men living in both areas. They bring trash from other neighborhoods and trash out the whole neighborhood, and there was piles of trash there constantly. We were concerned about that. So we've had some bad experiences with what went on at the house. And December 2019, the house had extensive fire damage due to supposedly faulty electrical wiring. The windows and doors was left open for months, and people would come through. Property standard did help a lot to minimize this problem. And we were told the house was going to be demolished. We've had a lot of troubling issues that make us concerned about what will happen if this 106 East Boulevard house is allowed to be rezoned as a duplex. The house is in close proximity to our house. Our 2 bedrooms and 2 restrooms are right there next to the house. There was constant conversation on phones. It was a hangout before when other neighbors were there right in the driveway. We're concerned that if more people move in and out, it will create more lack of privacy issues for us. Of course, the parking concerns are there. Average person has 2 cars. Get 4 cars there. Single car driveway that goes to the back to the garage would be a little more congestion on the street and in front of the house. The people that were there before, they had trailers and they had trucks, and they were in and out constantly. This is a statement my husband told me to make sure I put in, which he said that structurally don't believe there's no firewall that was built to separate the 2 living areas, and that the interior, and I've been through the house when Ms. McNeil was there, and there's an interior stairways to the 2nd floor, which means that it was always a single family resident. The family would go up and down this area here. The 2nd floor kitchen is not a structure, it's just another room, and there was not a separate outside staircase, even though something was attempted to make it that way. Now, at the neighborhood participation meeting, Mr. Clark did lay out his plans for the duplex and his honorable intentions for our peace of mind. But the majority of the surrounding family homeowners in attendance opposed the construction of the duplex. And I've talked to many people in the neighborhood. Almost 40 people signed a petition against rezoning this and to allow this to a duplex. We support improving abandoned properties and eliminating the blight in the Highland neighborhood. As homeowners, we have invested in this community, and we want neighbors not just to come in and live in a house. We must stay vigilant in preserving our community so that we can remain comfortable and safe in our homes. I have additional, my husband is out of town, but I'll try to read what he has. He gets a little more technical than I do. And his statement is that he met the property owner, he says, before he bought the property, and asked him at the time to make sure he do his due diligence before buying the house. And the owner was a real estate investor, Mr. Clark, bought the property, and he felt like without investigating the zoning matter, that he is now asking MPC to allow him to build a duplex in a primarily single-family area. The investor is currently asking MPC to step in because he's made a mistake of not performing his due diligence. The new owner wants to maximize his profit with a multifamily building in the middle of a single-family area. Currently, 2 renters are better than 1, and that's why he is proposing a duplex. This is my husband's email here. In business, we take risks. Sometimes we win and lose. In this case, the property owner can't lose with a single family or multifamily. None of us want a new owner to fail, but it's not the city responsibility for his business endeavors. And he have a list of, Ms. Clark already stated how the value of the property that he's going to invest. He talked about it at the meeting. The primary purpose of zoning is to maintain some consistency in neighborhoods. The zoning change will do exactly the opposite. With this request, the property owner is proposing to insert a non-family based unit in the midst of what is now a family-only portion of Highland. All the homes in this block are single-family, even the rental properties. All who showed up at the MPP meeting were families. Finally, this request will allow the property owner to maximize his profit regardless of how his new veteran proposal, his proposed fixing the parking, his additional fencing and maintenance commitment. And the property owner will have the right to sell at any time, and his commitments will go with him. So my husband said he's asking that the MPC reject us zone change request for this property and help maintain the consistency of this single-family zone. This is Ricky Coleman's comments. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Ms. Coleman. Are there any questions for Ms. Coleman? Ms. Newbert?
Yes, sir. Ms. Coleman, where do you live in relation to?
Next door,
Oh.
102.
Can you point for me here on the
Okay,
map?
let me see where it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions for Ms. Coleman? All right, ma'am, thank you very much. Is there anyone else present who care to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Gamage, and I live at 104 East College Street, 71104, and I object to the conversion from a single family to a duplex for a number of reasons. I've been a homeowner of this neighborhood for 16 years. I bought in Highland intentionally because I wanted to live in a historic neighborhood that was mixed in income, mixed ethnically, but was primarily home ownership. I'm very civically involved, and what I plan to do at 65, I'm 64 now, is to promote more single-family ownership in this historic neighborhood, rather than it turning into a series of rentals, and to also pressure landlords to keep up their property, which they currently do not do. The person from the property standards is right. We have to fuss at people all the time and kind of get on them in my block about owning property even when they live here in Bossier and not taking care of it. So living in the city does not guarantee that you will take care of your property or police your tenants. I say this also as a owner of a duplex that I inherited in Broadmoor. And so I have to really be seriously involved in my property. And I wonder if this young man from an investment group will be that involved. More rentals devalue the property values of the owners in the neighborhood. They also invite in, and as he said, there's lots of LLCs. So what it does is invite in more speculators, more turning from what could be single-family homes for working class, working poor people who could apply for grants or ways in which to own property in that neighborhood and really bring that neighborhood back to the historic integrity that it had in years past. The property in question was lived in by a mother and son, and while I think that people who invest in property have a right to recoup their investment, they also have the responsibility to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood, and that is really primarily a single-family neighborhood. The spot zones he's talking about are of condos near Centenary, Veterans Home, those kind of things, and one down the block on Boulevard, but that also is owned by a family. So it's duplex, but it's owned by a family. So in closing, I'd like to say, while I appreciate him doing his due diligence in trying to come before the commission and to seek a change in zoning, I personally, as a homeowner and someone who's invested in this community, would like to see our R1 zoning maintained and not have any more rentals in Highland. We have enough. That's all I have to say.
Any questions for Mr. Morris? All right, ma'am, thank you very much. Next person, please, someone else.
Hello, how are you? My name is Jimmy Randall. I live at 101 East Boulevard.
Mr.
In
Randall?
reference,
Mr. Randall, would you be comfortable lowering your mask so we can hear you a little bit better?
Sure.
All right, thank you.
As I was saying, my name is Jimmy Randall, and I live at 101 East Boulevard, Shreveport, Louisiana, 71104. And to point to reference to where I live, right across the street, right here. My objection is to transferring it or changing it to a dual multifamily complex. I admire, I'm sorry I forgot your name, but I admire him. I told him, I spoke with him at the meetings. I admire him for that. My only objection is making it to a residential. I've been in this home, my home, since 1997. Mrs. McNeil and her son used to live there. However, I understand that someone has illegally placed a second electrical meter there, which is not legal. However, someone has gotten it on board, on record, as being a multiple family home. As recently as, I can give you the date, the 10th, the 25th of October, I pulled it up on the internet, and it still lists this particular resident as a single family home. And I can leave this with whomever would like to. The website I went to is called xhome, it's xhome.com, is where I was able to locate that information. As I said before, I admire him. I think he's doing a good job. As far as restoring it, I have no objection to him restoring it, and as long as it remains a single family resident. I'm sorry I wasn't as prepared, not prepared, but presented in such a way as the other people. I live, like I said, across the street, and I thank you for your time, and I would like to see it just remain a single family resident.
Any questions for Mr. Randall? Any questions for Mr. Randall? Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
Is there anyone else present who care to speak in opposition?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madison Poche. I live at 262 Wilkinson Street, so I'm like down here somewhere. And so I really wanted to speak in opposition to some of the processes that got us here. So one, I think we've kind of heard this seemed like more of a gray area than a simple non-compliance case. Two, it's just seems like there's not enough access to information, right? If homeowners like the Clarks can't easily see that this is a single family zone property, then there are kind of bigger questions that I think need to be answered. And then kind of more importantly, the logic of this case seems a little bit backwards, right? Like now we're, instead of solving this on the front end, right, we're in this kind of false dilemma that like the neighbors that want investment in the neighborhood like will need to choose between having it or like lowering the standards of the zoning that's already in place. But more importantly, we have an issue with enforcing illegal duplexes. I think we are in a situation where, as I've said, there are illegal duplexes all around this neighborhood, and so the good guys that are going through this process have put their business on pause for 6 months, while the bad actors who just go ahead and split a property in half are able to make money, right? So we kind of have an unfair situation right now that needs to be solved at some point. So I know Mr. Bailey has a proposal at the end of this meeting that seems like it begins to tackle this. But because we haven't tackled the bigger issue at play, investors like the Clarks have unrealistic expectations about the value of turning a single family home into a duplex, the money that they can make off of this neighborhood, right? And we need to fix that. Also, it seems like this case is set up where we're kind of saying that because someone illegally changed it into a duplex and it sat empty and there was kind of a reasonable amount of ignorance in the case, that this will now be allowable. And more so that there's kind of a circular logic of saying, well, there's, if we look at this neighborhood, I counted, there's about 200 single family homes all in yellow. And there's one out of the 200 that has been converted into a duplex. And so we're using that one as the precedent to allow this one to also be changed into a duplex, in addition to all the illegal duplexes. And so if we move forward with this case, then the next case that's going to come up is someone else who's created an illegal duplex. Maybe it sat empty for a year, and they're going to reference the 2 duplexes in this neighborhood that should allow them to change it. And so we, are kind of, I guess how do I say this? Like our law should only be as good as the exceptions, and it seems like we're making this
Mr.
judgment
Chairman, it's
out
Tom.
of. Oh, sorry.
Ms. Porsche, before you leave the mic,
Yeah.
are there any questions for board members for Ms. Porsche? Any questions?
I'm gonna ask.
All right, Ms. Newbert, I'm sorry, Mr. Joseph first.
Good afternoon, Ms. Poche, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
All right, so as I appreciate it, and if I take a broad stroke here, you're not necessarily opposed to what the Clarks are trying to do.
You know, if
Your opposition
every
is-
investor could be like the Clarks, our city would be in good hands.
Got it. Your opposition is to this overall process in general.
And
Kinda
I'll say I
streamline.
won't. My heart goes out to every neighbor who lives 4 steps away from another house. I mean, these properties are close
Right
together.
next to
When we say there's a driveway, you can touch both properties. So continuing to increase the density at the expense of neighbors like Ms. Coleman is, I think, admirable. That we want to upzone and infill, but maybe not the best strategy to get towards that future goal.
In this particular location.
Yeah, or in any, as we figure out zoning, right? So I don't know enough about like every single piece of this property, but I think the process concerns me.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Ms. Newbert?
Yes. So my question is, how well have you studied like what's happening here? Because I'm hearing illegal duplexes, other duplexes exist. How many duplexes do you think are in this general vicinity that, as you refer to them?
Did you guys say you counted 4 within 2 blocks?
Ma'am, you'll need to talk to us. You
Oh,
can't
sorry.
talk with-
He sounds like he had better information. I would say on my block, 3 houses or 3 or 4 blocks away, there are probably 5 on 2 blocks, I would say. I mean, they're illegal. You can go down any block in Highland and there'll be more than 1 illegal duplex.
So in actuality, even, and I'm going to say this, that they may or may not be legally zoned, because I don't know, I'm not looking at them.
Yeah.
So what is being proposed here is really not a new concept. Those homes exist in that area now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But I think my greater point would be, this neighborhood has been zoned as single family for a purpose, right? And so, this process of saying, well, it's been illegally turned into a duplex, it's sat empty for a year, and therefore, it's just a non-complying duplex, right? It really goes to our least common denominator. It really plays into the hands of people who, like Ms. Hayes had said, maybe don't live in the area and are trying to maximize profit off of our neighborhood, not necessarily the Clarks, but other investors. So this is, it's just a bad precedent, even if it's the state of things, right? It's not what's intended.
All right, any more questions for Ms. Porcher? All right, thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else present who'd care to speak in opposition to this request? Anyone else present who'd care to speak in opposition? Hearing, you've already had your turn, sir. Yeah,
I would like to readdress if I could.
No, I'm sorry, you've already had your turn. It's Mr. Clark's turn to come and do a rebuttal in reference to statements that were made. I'm going to invite Ms. Clark to sit right behind you.
That's the boss. That's the boss.
If she'll
Yes, sir.
take a seat right behind you and pass you the notes, and don't mess it up.
I'll try.
That's only help I can give.
First, I just want to make clear, I don't want it to be misunderstood that it's me versus the neighbors or anything. Like I explained to Ms. Coleman and Mr. Coleman at the meeting, we're just as invested, if not vested, in seeing this thing in long term, not just short term, quick payout or anything like that. We're intentional in revitalizing the neighborhood. Like we mentioned before with the zoning current configuration of the property, and like I tried to articulate to everyone at the meeting, we're not saying, hey, just because these people are illegal or whatever, like we should be able to do the same thing. That's not what we were proposing. If that had been the case, we'd have just went ahead and just guerrilla style this thing, but we're trying to do it through the proper channels and the proper way. Like I said, this request is is compatible with the current structure of the neighborhood. There are at least 5 duplexes just on that same block being illegally occupied or used right now at this current moment. All we're trying to do is do things the right way with it. I heard the gentleman earlier mention the website that he looked at where it showed the property listed as a single family. I'm not arguing or disputing it because, like I said earlier, once we pulled the zoning and everything, we found out after the fact, after we purchased the property, that it was in fact zoned as such. I want to highlight some of the things that we were looking at when we were conducting our due diligence, i.e. the Caddo accept. You can find this. You can actually pull this up. I checked as recently as today. The Caddo accessor still shows this property listed here as a duplex. So things like this, in conjunction with the MLS from the realtor when we bought the property, we're not debating or arguing with Ms. Coleman that whatever the previous owners did legally or what have you, we're not arguing with that. All we're trying to do is address the situation the right way moving forward to make this an R2. That's all we're trying to do. My wife wrote a lot of notes here, forgive me. Tenants. We mentioned the tenants, and to address Ms. Coleman's concern, I want to highlight a lot of those concerns, if you're paying attention, or pretty much were before we bought the property. Like I expressed to Ms. Coleman, we're willing to do or work with her any way to make her feel comfortable. That's why we proposed installing a fence, a higher fence, privacy fence per code. We addressed the parking situation earlier. Do we have the pictures by chance? I'm a visual person, so I really want to show everybody currently there's a 2-car garage in the back. The 20 by 20 slab that I was talking about is off to the east side of the property. It won't be affected by Ms. Coleman's side on the west side. That right there should alleviate or solve the problem or the concern with potential residents parking on the street. There should be more than enough adequate parking for the proposed tenants. Firewall, I heard you mention earlier about the firewall. I think I addressed that earlier, that's included in our scope of work that we submitted to the city. Basically, any concerns or any concerns we're wanting to work with surrounding neighbors. We don't want to come across as investors who, I'm well aware of the type of neighbors or the type of investors that you're talking about who don't really care about the neighborhood, just want to make a quick buck. We're highly invested in this area, and I wish we had pictures of some of the property or some of the work that we've done in the Highland area, but we're very proud of the work that we do in the Highland area. That's pretty much all I got. Thank you for hearing us out today.
Any questions for this gentleman, board members? I see Mr. Joseph in the queue first.
I'm actually in the queue for staff.
All right, hold still, Mr. Clark. Stand still.
Ms. Poche raised an interesting issue. Do we have any metrics on the illegal duplexes?
And I wanted to follow up at the end of this particular case. There will always be legal everything if nobody ever reports to the proper authorities what's illegal. We have a zoning enforcement section. Mr. Jordan is here today. If persons are interested in reporting every legal duplex that there is in Highland, Mr. Jordan and his staff will address those complaints and take the proper actions against them. But just coming up here, sharing that there are illegal duplexes, illegal anything is not helping upgrade the community. But we have no information on what's legal or illegal in Highland right now as far as the housing stock.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Robertson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clark, I seem to recall sometime during this discussion, someone saying at one time the property had 2 electric meters?
Yes, sir. 2017, that was 4 years before we purchased the property. It was installed without a permit. That is correct. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm sorry our SWEPCO friends have left the room, but I want to redirect now to staff. If I understand the process correctly, when someone applies for an electric meter, the utility company asks for certain documentation, including, I would think, either an occupancy permit or a building permit?
The city of Shreveport does not presently have a residential certificate of occupancy process. It's being suggested that we adopt one, but when you're speaking in relationship to commercial locations where SWEPCO requires documentation and approval from the city before it establishes electrical service.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, whoever requested the second meter for this property did not have to supply information to SWEPCO? Or they didn't have to supply city documentation of proper zoning for 2 meters?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. Well, that surprises me because in my years as a utility regulator, I've often heard about the utility company essentially being the enforcement agent for the local government to determine that a person applying for a electrical service had the proper authority to put in the service.
And I agree with you, and I will not make any additional comments about SWEPCO, but there have been some services that have been granted that were not totally legal.
Sure, I understand. And I have a follow-up question. I generally subscribe to the notion that there are no stupid questions, only stupid answers, but this one may strike some of our friends as dumb. Is it inherently bad to have rental property as opposed to owner-occupied property? Do we have any evidence in the planning journals to verify that?
There probably has been lots of different discussions about this issue in a lot of different cities, but as far as empirical data to say, rental versus single family, what that does overall, I don't know that we have anything conclusive on that. I do know that when we look at property, our regulations do not have any differentiation between rental and whether it's home ownership. We don't have any empirical data right now to say how many are owner-occupied in Highland and other neighborhoods, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's not rather high non-ownership occupancy, because that seems to be a trend, but we have not done any particular studies on that, and I don't think there's any really strong data to say that one is worse than the other.
It seems like it would be entirely case specific to whoever the
Yes.
owner was and whoever the renters were.
Exactly.
Right.
What we will be doing in the future, and we've been in discussions with the city council because the subject matter comes up quite often in relationship to how properties affect the value of properties next door to them. We're not appraisals, and we don't have that information, but we find it happening so many times when cases are brought before you. And we are trying to have the ability in the next year's budget to contract with an appraisal, and when we have questions of this nature, to provide that empirical data to you that would address those concerns, because nobody wants to do anything that would impact someone's property negatively, but we never really have anything of substance to substantiate that. We just have accusations.
Well,
Mr.
Mr.
Morton?
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry.
I just want to conclude by saying, if I had a nickel for every person who's told me that my neighborhood of Broadmoor is going to the dogs because it's becoming all residential, then I'd be living in Southern Trace. But I just haven't seen it myself, so
Do you mean
I
rental?
need to be convinced that rental is inherently a negative thing.
I still think that it's dependent upon the property owner themselves as to whether it's a bad thing or a good thing. Unfortunately, some of us, all of us have not been privileged throughout life. Some of us have been renters. We've come into areas in our beginnings and had humble beginnings, and we worked ourselves up from, because that was the only thing we could do as an owner, to have a residence. So I still believe that it's totally dependent upon how well a landlord, and we'll talk about that later, how well a landlord monitors his or her property as to whether or not rental property is impacted in a neighborhood.
All right, Mr. Morton?
Yes, relative to the electric, how many weather heads are attached to the house?
How many weather heads? Previously?
Currently?
Currently 2.
2?
Yes, sir.
So there's 2 meters also?
No, not right. The old meters, the one that was put in without the permit, we haven't removed any of them. Like I said earlier, we just finished with the roof and we ceased all work.
But there are two weather heads?
Yes, sir. Currently, yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Newbert?
Comment and then a question for the staff. I have rental properties. It can be painful, but I've been very fortunate and very involved in my rental properties. And I would like to commend you for making the decision to put the costs for taking care of the landscape in the yard in the price of what you're going to be charging for rent in this case. I feel like that's an equation, a recipe for success as a landlord. I also do it with pest control. So that's just a couple comments. For the staff, based on this document that's put up here, do we know how this is designated as a duplex from the tax assessor's office? But I'm just questioning how it's a duplex there, but it's not zoned for one.
They make their determination on information they receive when they're dealing with the tax and their own visits to sites or whatever and what they observe, but it has nothing to do with what the right is regard to land use. That may have been an observation, that may have been some documentation that they saw or something that they believed, but it is not something that has any validity as in regard to what our ordinance.
And we don't ever see that as a synergy that we should be trying. I mean, is there ever going to be a point where our zoning would meet? It would flow into this information?
No, it's a separate database. And for example, we've had properties, we've had cases here where people have purchased properties and it says on the tax assessor that it's commercial or industrial, when in fact it was, another designation. So they're looking at from a standpoint of just what it appears physically and how that might affect the proration of the property or the value of the property. They're not looking at it from a land use perspective. For those to align would probably be pretty difficult because you're basically looking at it in 2 totally different perspectives when you're looking at the property. We're looking at land use, they're looking at structure type.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, might I add, as a fellow investor, what we learned with this property, because this is what we were basically using prior to purchasing a lot of our properties, we thought the cattle accessor was pretty much solid as far as the information they provided. However, with this zoning issue moving forward, first out the chute, before we even purchase a property, is go straight to the zoning and see what
I was going to make that recommendation to you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a painful issue.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
understand.
Mr. Elberson?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that in I always appreciate the staff's comments with respect to the master plan, and Mr. Clark had mentioned that he had reviewed that as well, because that's very important for us to understand, first and foremost, what is in the master plan for certain areas. We listened to a ton of great anecdotal evidence on both sides, and it makes you wonder about individuals, and I would love to see the city incentivize local ownership for multifamily in all aspects somehow, but we can't really take that into account, individuals. He could turn around and flip it to some big company that's out of town that has a ton of tax sale stuff. It doesn't really matter, but you know, what we need to do is understand what the purpose of the master plan is and what they were thinking when they analyzed the area, what kind of comments they got about it, and you know, I appreciate the fact that you understand what that is, and that's part of your whole plan is to be consistent with that. So that's just a comment more than anything else, mainly for everybody else's consideration.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, I don't see any other names in the queue. Having find no others, thank you very much, Mr. Clark.
Thank you for your time.
At this particular time, board members, what is your pleasure?
Thank you.
Motion approved.
Motion by Mr. Robertson.
Second.
Second by Ms. Newbert. All those in favor, please vote yes. Oppositions, no. Motion is carried. Thank you very much, board members. This particular time, we'll move to item number 14, case number 21-69-C, Code Text Amendments. Mr. Adam Bailey.
You got it up, Jasmine? All right. These code text amendments are an overview of what we are calling. Hey, James, can you put it on both screens? Thank you. The rental dwelling registration program. I'm not going to go into it line item by line item. That would take a very long time, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview, and we can ask questions at the end. Let's go over brief history. Mr. Elverson talked about the master plan. In the master plan, it talks about a rental code, and it was identified as a priority initiative. We are calling this a registration program. It is a city council initiative. Councilwoman Taylor and Councilman Nicholson found that establishing a rental registration and safety inspection program would help protect public safety and the welfare of tenants by encouraging proper maintenance and residential rental housing, basically to look after and to fight bad landlords. It's a two-component program which calls for the registration in a public database as well as a complaint-driven safety inspection. Oops. Slide doesn't work. Can you go back 2 slides? I'm just going to have to tell you slides because this isn't working. Back 1 more. Now forward. There you go. Sorry about that. Go. All right. Who's applicable for this? It says that no person shall rent, occupy, sublease, sublet another person for occupancy any rental unit until the owner gets a certificate of registration for that rental unit. That registration shall identify all rental dwelling units on the property and shall be the only registration required under this code. Failure to register any rental dwelling unit constitutes a violation of this code. Next slide.
There are exemptions: hotels, motels, inns, bed and breakfast, single-family occupancy, boarding houses, short-term rentals, RV parks. They wouldn't be required to register. Anything that has to do with a state licensed hospital, hospice, community care, nursing homes, immediate health care, they don't have to apply. Rental dwelling units that are government entity that has to do with housing authority that owns, operates, or manages, or individuals living in a home and they rent out rooms in that home, they do not have to register. Next slide. Who's going to administer it? The zoning administrator and zoning enforcement will administer this program. Next slide. What does the registration entail? That any type of rental unit, which includes single-family, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, multifamily units, apartment units, condominiums, townhomes, guest houses, dwellings as an accessory, any of that that has a duration of longer than 30 days would be required to register. If some new apartments or new buildings are built as within new construction, they would not be required to register because their final inspection would automatically qualify them as part of the inspection. Next slide. The duration is 1 year from January to December, and a renewal would be required each December. Next slide. Once a registration is obtained, a copy of that registration should either be posted within each rental dwelling unit, within the office of the property, in a common area, or some other conspicuous place. In an alternative, if no such place can be found, that if the tenant or a potential tenant or the zoning administrator ask for the registration, it has to be given on demand. Next slide. So when it talks about the inspection authority and criteria, this is a complaint-driven inspection program that we're not going to go out and inspect all the thousands of units that are in the city right now. Only if somebody were to call the MPC office to say, hey, I think there's a safety issue here, I want you to go out and inspect, whether it be my property or another property. That opens up the criteria to allow the zoning administrator and his office to go do an inspection. Upon receiving a complaint, a notice will be given, and I'll go about that notice in just a second. So what is that notice? A letter will be sent to the property owner letting them know when the time of the inspection will be. The owner is required to be at the inspection, and the conclusion of the inspection, the zoning administrator or representative shall provide a copy of the results of the inspection. If they fail to allow for the inspection of the property, they can be fined for that, as well as a court order can be given to allow for entry in order to be able to do the inspection. Quick inspection rundown, what it is and what it isn't. It is a health and safety inspection. It's not a building code or overall condition inspection. What to inspect on the day of the inspection. When that notice goes out, they'll give a 2-hour inspection window. The average inspection takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and within 1 to 2 business days, there will be a follow-up with what they need to do in terms of the results of that inspection. They will either pass it with conditions, they'll fail it, they'll fail the re-inspection, or they will be, let them know that they missed an appointment. When it comes to a satisfactory inspection, I talked about a database, and I'll talk about that just here in just a few more minutes, that a certificate of compliance will be issued and be noted on that property that an inspection did take place and that property is compliant with the rental standards. And just like with the certificate of registration, that certificate of compliance will also be required to be posted in the same manner as such. An unsatisfactory or a failed inspection, within the 1 to 2 days when they give notice of the inspection results, they will, if the inspection has been failed or it passes with conditions, a notice will be given to say, hey, in order for your property to be in compliance, these are the steps in which you need to take place. Right now, we're setting a reasonable time not to exceed 30 days for the correction of any violations. However, some violations will be required to be fixed on a much more expedited manner, and as such, that notice will, say, hey, you don't have a hot water heater, your hot water heater's not working, you have 3 days in order to become compliant. Rental standards, I think there's 11 or 12. I'll go over these real briefly. They're pretty much the standard rental standards throughout the country. You have to have smoke detectors, you have to have plumbing that's properly working, you have to have a bathtub, shower, lavatory that works, kitchen sinks that work properly and provide running water. Talked about the hot water heater. Shall be provided proper heating facilities that maintain proper temperature. It specifically says 6 to 8 degrees in habitable rooms, bathrooms, and toilets. Should be provided with properly installed maintenance electrical system. The fireplaces, chimneys should work properly. Roofs, windows, exterior doors must be adequate to prevent dampness and the like. It should have a proper structural systems, needs to have a proper means of exit or escape, and it shouldn't be infested with insects, rodents, or other pests. I think that's it on the rental standards. And there's also tenant accountability. We're not just throwing all this on the landlord. The tenant has to be held accountable for it as well. So if there is a violation and the property owner comes in and says, hey, I'm doing everything in compliance, however, my tenant is causing some of these standards, the zoning administrator will take that into account to be able to correct the violations as needed. I talked about a registration database. Any registered property will go into a publicly accessible database that will list the address of the registered units, the date of any complaints received, whether or not they're in compliance, and any violations that were cited. We're not going to put any property names or names on there. It's just going to be the address and anything moving forward. When it comes to violations, penalties, and enforcement, it follows the same rule of thumb that we do with Article 19. The zoning administrator will bring out a citation. In terms of a notice, they'll have time to fix it. If they don't fix it, then we'll move forward with a proper enforcement mechanism to eventually go over to city attorney's office for legal, and then it'll end up in city court as needed. There are appeal processes in place because the zoning administrator is making some decisions. Those are administrative decisions. His decisions can be appealed to ZBA. If an aggrieved party doesn't like what the ZBA says, that will go to City Council. At City Council, those decisions can be appealed to District Court. We are we're a recommending body. We don't levy fees, but we're going to recommend to City Council the following fees. Initial registration is $35. Renewal is $30. As I told with new construction, there wouldn't be no fee because that would be a part of the final inspection. If they failure to register, that's just a double fee of the registration, but there would be a fine for failing to register of $75. The certificate of compliance, there's no fees associated with that. The inspection would be it would be the third inspection in which you would receive a fee. The first inspection, there would be no fee. Obviously, there would be a second inspection to go out there to make sure that everything was compliant. However, if it wasn't compliant and they would have to need to go out a third time, that inspection would be $100 in each inspection following. Also, finally, a missed inspection would have a rescheduling fee of $25. And I think that is it. That is a broad overview. That's a lot of information. Be glad to answer any questions, but I tried to do it in a little more detail than yesterday.
Well, I'm looking at my queue. I've got one in the queue right now. Ms. Newbert?
Mr. Bailey, hi.
Hello.
A couple questions. Wanted to talk specifically about the responsibility if it is determined at the time of inspection that the renter is responsible for damage. How does that work in terms of putting that responsibility onto the renter? What will happen?
Well, so how I think we envisioned it is that a renter unit, a renter, somebody calls in and says, hey, these are unsafe conditions. So the call comes into the MPC, they set up an inspection. There's a couple of steps that have to take place where the inspector can't just go into the property. He, as it's written into it, that the owner has to be there. If it's a properly registered unit, that registration gives them the authority to go in. So we're assuming, you know, on this hypothetical situation that it's properly registered. So they'll set up a time, they'll go in and they'll look at it, and you know, based on the information given through the complaint, they'll go in, there'll be a checklist, they have to, you know, check off on everything, and then I'm sure there will also be some conversations between the inspector and the tenant, the inspector and the owner. If at that time, and as a real quick, and it said in the ordinance, that if the owner can provide evidence that, you know, hey, I'm compliant, I do everything I'm supposed to, look at these conditions are based on what the owner or what the tenant is doing, then that will be taken into consideration on saying, okay, here are the next steps. Now, we're not saying that you're automatically going to be fined, you know, just for having an inspection. It's just more of the, not the fallout, but the process afterwards in getting the whatever the complaint is in order to be fixed. And if the owner can provide evidence to the zoning administrator, they will take that into account on what those next steps are in order to get into compliance.
So let's just say it's the fault of the renter, for the topic of this conversation. How is that compliance enforced? That's my question. What happens? Let's say they break the water here. The tenant does, and it's new.
I think if I may.
I'm just questioning, I want to know how this is going to come out on the other side. I understand how it's going to be enforced from the owner's side.
I think that most of us that have rental property have a lease agreement that details some of the things that are involved and responsibilities of the tenant. I think that this code is more of a protection for the tenants because of the negative things that are done by landlords, and the tenants have no recourse. Landlords have, you know, recourse. They can charge it in the next rent payment for the fees for repairs that must be done, but tenants have no recourse. So the rental code is more of a protection for tenants than landlords.
Okay. All right, and so the other question I had is, it's complaint driven. So you're going out on a specific complaint, whatever that is. If you get to the property and there are other violations, what happens?
No, meaning other violations in terms of
Meeting the minimum standard that's set forth in.
Well, they would have to, through the rental code, we'll develop a checklist that says, hey, you have to comply with this. We're not going to go in, it's not going to be a building code, it's not going to be, you know, looking at anything outside of the rental safety standard.
So you're going to look at everything. You're not going to just look at that one thing that you're called there for. That's my question. You're going to look
correct.
at compliance
Yes.
in all aspects.
Correct.
Okay.
You good?
I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Sater?
How do we do with the absentee landlord? He never comes to Louisiana, period.
Probably the same mechanism in which how property standards deals with it right now. Do our best to contact them, potentially go through that enforcement mechanism, place a lien, and move forward with that. I don't know, Mr. Clark, do you have?
Yeah, I think that we can, and I was looking back at the attorney, that's why I asked the attorneys to come, although no pre-warning, but I think the long arm of the law can reach out to these locations and cite these property owners that are absentee landlords from the city of Shreveport. And I'll yield to Nuska if she'll just share some insight on that.
Yeah, here's one.
Come right
You can go to my seat.
So you have a short walk.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Normally, yes, that's normally the procedure. If we have a landlord who is out of state, we can try to get them to come to Louisiana. Now, there are some complications with that because sometimes you'll send it and they won't respond depending on the severity of whatever the charge they're getting, because we've had issues with that with other cases where we have issues bringing the landlord. So it really will be a case-by-case situation to see how easily it would be to get the landlord to come to Louisiana.
I would just like to add to that, that as with any other ordinance, this is the foundation stages of the ordinance. That's why you amend ordinances as you find that other processes are needed. You add those additional processes. The city of Shreveport has nothing process in place to address the things that are happening with tenants throughout the city. You see them on the news, you see it all the time, and they have no resources or anyone to contact in relationship to these negative things that are happening. So this is just the beginning. If we find, like you're sharing, Mrs. Newbert, if we find that there are modification amendments that need to be done, you'll be seeing those amendments.
I just have one more question. The $25 for the missed appointment or appointment fee, that seems awfully low to me.
Okay.
I don't know how y'all came up with these numbers, but I don't know if that would
Usually
encourage-
when we do fee studies, we kind of look at across the board what other cities are doing, but we take into account the dynamics and the demographics and the economy of scale of those cities. Whereas then when it came to the registration fee per unit, I've seen them as high as $75 per unit. I've also seen them lower than what we're proposing. When it comes to inspection fees, those are across the board. But one of the constants in the dozen or so fees that I looked at other cities was the missed appointment. For some strange reason, it was always around the $20, $25, $30 scale. So that's what we simply plugged in. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be higher.
Gas was $1.50 a gallon too. I mean, there's other things going on. It just seems awfully low to me.
Okay.
Yeah, awfully low. But that's just a comment.
Mr. Sater?
I think we covered it. It's still, like Ms. Newbert just brought up, it looks like it needs to be a little higher to pay for you guys doing the job.
Okay, I can adjust that.
I think it would be a good, and people see the number might say, hey, I need to straighten this out without having to be called.
I agree, Mr. Sater. I mean, put some teeth in it.
I think if you all would allow us to use the national norms to start with, and as things grow, and as this ordinance proves to be effective, I think the community and the governmental agencies would be more receptive to us increasing those fees.
Like I said, it was just a comment.
I agree with you. I thought they should be more, but I've also been around this building long enough to know that once you start imposing fees, especially from the MPC, it gets a hearty welcome from the general community. So we need to get in, get established, and then we can justify that there is a need for higher fees.
I think I would like to just close with a comment. I don't think this was easy to do, and I appreciate your leadership on this.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Bailey? Well, board members, at this particular time, what's your pleasure as a result of his report?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Newbert. All those in favor, please vote yes. Oppositions, no. All right, that motion carries. Mr. Clark, I'm going to pause at this time and turn the mic over to you before we call an ending to the public hearing.
I think the first thing I need to share with the MPC board, Mr. Chair, is that the City Council did pass a resolution at its last meeting encouraging the MPC to place a moratorium on the issuance of any occupational license and certificates of occupancies for liquor stores. This becomes effective November 5th, so you would not be able to take any actions on the moratorium today, but you would be able to vote on accepting or rejecting the moratorium at your December meeting. And at that time, we will have a more detailed explanation of what would be involved in the moratorium and what we feel would be our responsibilities are to address the concerns of the council. I think that it needs to be said that we had a response from the new board members on the MPC board. They all went to gain training at the Louisiana APA chapter conference in Lafayette. I was extremely proud to share with my colleagues at the state level that this board is determined to be in compliance with the laws of the state of Louisiana. I'm very hopeful that they gained valuable information. This is something I served on the state executive board for 5 years, and this is something that I pushed extremely hard, and I also pushed bringing some of that training, most of the training, beyond the conferences done in South Louisiana. And one of the things that I promoted extremely hard was that the conference, that training should be done in North Louisiana, because we have two cities in North Louisiana, major cities, Monroe and Shreveport, and you could also include Bossier in that process. So generally they will do a training in North Louisiana and a training in South Louisiana and at a state conference. But I just wanted to share that I was extremely proud that the board members were there and gaining the actual training, and that the city of Shreveport, if no other city, is in total compliance with the state law that requires the 4 hours of training.
Mr. Clark, before you leave that subject, if you're about to, would it be all right if I would at least announce the names for board members who don't know, the members that attended the training, if that's okay?
By all means, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Chris Elverson, Mr. Bill Robertson, Ms. Laura Newbert, Ms. Rachel Jackson, Mr. Gabrielle Boldaris, and Mr. Harold Sada. Thank y'all very much for taking the time to do that. It can only help us as we go down the road, and our compliments to you. And I believe Mr. Boldaris has a comment he wants to make as a result of being at that particular session in Lake.
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to, some of the board members were not able to make it to the lunch, but I wanted to mention that, at the lunch, Mr. Clark was the recipient of a lifetime achievement, quite a few years under his belt. So I wanted to make the board members aware of that as well.
Well, that deserves a round of applause. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'll just share this with you. The second recipient was Steve Villavasso, and to be even mentioned in the same sentence with Stephen Villavasso because of all of the things that he's done historically in the state of Louisiana in reference to planning, from the days before the American Planning Association was even the APA, it was AIP. Was a humbling experience for me to even be considered in the company of such great and such magnificent people in planning for the state of Louisiana. Thank you so much for that acknowledgement, Mr. Barberis.
Well, Mr. Clark, before we leave that, I would invite board members to share a copy of their paperwork with the secretary, so that might become a part of our records upstairs if y'all can work that out at some point in time. I believe you got a certificate, did you? And that would be great to make a part of our records. Mr. Clark.
And lastly, the board members, some of you spent a night, others of you drove down and drove back. Those expenses will need to be turned in to Jasmine, and we'll be reaching out to get that information in order to get some reimbursements for that training. It's a simple investment that the city and the parish makes for you to being in compliance and your knowledge improvement. But I wanted you to rest assured that these type trainings are covered as part of your professional advancement. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I said enough yesterday. I have no other additional comments.
Well, I'd like to make a couple more, if the board will indulge me. Back on September the 22nd, the executive committee met and did a performance evaluation of our executive director, and we would like to come in December and present to the board our findings and make some recommendations following that presentation. And we'd like to make that a part of the agenda for the December meeting.
Yes.
Also, I want to make known to the board, having gone through our rules for operation, we failed to identify a nominating committee for the month of October for officers for this board. Normally, the election would be held in November and persons would be identified to occupy the officers' positions with this board. However, we're kind of in a holding pattern right now with trying to find out something official from the parish commission as well as with the city council as to how we'll be instructed to move forward after January 1. So having said that, hopefully during the December meeting, we'll be able to come to you with some kind of information as to how we'll proceed in the future. The executive board is made up of the chairman, the vice chair is Mr. Curtis Joseph, and the secretary is Mr. Elberson. One last item under 17 would be public comments. Is there anyone present who would like to make any public comments to the board before we adjourn this meeting? Hearing none, Mr. Joseph.
Motion to adjourn?
This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, sir.